This is hard enough as it is, for crying out loud. The first thing I need to do is come to Senator Cadman's immediate defense. Senator Cadman and I have not coordinated speeches in any way, shape, or form. I haven't seen his, he hasn't seen mine. So he has no idea what I'm about to say, and actually, neither does anybody else, with the possible exception of me, and I may not be an exception. So it is fascinating that the themes and the conclusions and everything of our speeches are so similar. I mean, nobody's going to believe that we didn't coordinate. But I'm telling you, he's not a Democrat. We didn't coordinate.
I appreciate you saying that.
Maybe I should endorse you. I'll see what that does for you. So I think it was May. I know it was 1979. I was working my way through college on a paramedic ambulance in Colorado Springs. And my partner and I were dispatched to an automobile accident with injuries at the intersection of Delta and Hancock. And I didn't think there would be so many people here from Colorado Springs that would actually know what I'm talking about when I say that. When we got there, we discovered that a pickup truck had run a red light at in excess of 50 miles an hour, driven obviously by a drunk driver, and T-boned a Camaro. And this is 1979. That car was 3 or 4 years old, so it was a 75, 76 Camaro, and those of you that are familiar with such things will remember that that's a muscle car, and there's plenty of beef to that car. But when he hit it at over 50 miles an hour, right in the driver's side door, he took the driver's side door that would normally be about here if you pretend I'm the driver, and moved it to about here. It was only one of 2 times in my 27-year emergency services career where not wearing a seatbelt was a good idea. You should always wear a seatbelt, because I went to thousands of things and there were only 2, but this was one. It was about noon when this happened, and it knocked the driver, obviously, pretty much into the passenger seat, but the way cars were constructed in those days, it also took the dashboard and lowered it, trapping his legs, so the man was trapped in the car. The other driver was okay. We called a second ambulance for him just because, as we referred to it, the mechanism of injury, there was so much damage, there was so much force involved in this accident that even though you're walking and talking and you seem fine, we want to get you to the hospital and get you checked out. So we called a second ambulance to deal with him while my partner and I started working on the man that had been driving the Camaro, and he was 21, 22 years old. And when we got to him, he was unconscious and responded only to deep, painful stimuli. I mean, he was hurt in a very big way. And obviously there was head trauma and chest trauma, and no doubt significant internal injuries. The fire department got there just right after we did, and very quickly called for a second alarm, as we say, on the traffic accident. And I think eventually a third alarm for sure, and maybe even a fourth alarm, because we needed to extricate this gentleman from the car, and it was going to take a bunch of horsepower and manpower and specialized equipment to do that. I went around quickly to the passenger seat, the passenger door, which also didn't open very easily, because again, we knocked this car to where it's not quite as square as it was supposed to be. So I opened that door, and I took the door and I jammed it with everything that I had to bend it as far open as I could so that it almost touched the fender, the front fender on the passenger side. It didn't quite touch, but I moved it as far as I could because I knew this was going to be the only access to the patient that my partner and I would have as the fire department, took over the front of the car and the side of the car to cut out the windshield, cut off the roof, move the steering wheel. I mean, it's quite a process to actually do what they were going to have to do, and they were totally focused on that. And my partner and I were totally focused on the man that was injured, and usually there's plenty of help because you've got 3 or 4 firefighters on the truck plus the 2 of you, and so generally that's more than enough. But as I said, in this case, I think it was a 4-alarm car accident, so that they ended up with like 12 to 16 firefighters just focused on cutting him out of the car, and then just the 2 of us focused on the patient. So we were running out of hands very, very quickly, and I kind of glanced up, and the police had shut down the entire intersection because the cars still were in the middle of the intersection. And nobody was going through at all, and so some cars were having to park because there was no place for them to go, and people were sort of gathering on one of the corners of the intersection of Delta and Hancock. And for some reason, I looked up and there was a guy standing towards the front of the crowd, and he just had this look about him like, hey, I can help. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And frankly, we needed the help. So I grabbed him and I said, would you stand here? And it was between that fender and that door, right in there. Hold these IV bags, and when the fluid gets down to this level, whatever I'm doing, get my attention, because I want to change out the IV bag and continue to get this guy fluid. Because again, his pulse was high, his blood pressure was low, and it was they were going in the wrong directions, pulse going up and blood pressure going down because he was in shock. He had significant injuries. So the man said, absolutely. And he did exactly what I asked him to do. And my partner and I monitored the guy, worked on the guy, talked about what can we do, how can we do it, how can we, how much further do we have to go to get him out? Are there any other things we can do? We broke the seat, the passenger seat, we just crushed it down so that we would have more access to the patient. Eventually, he wasn't breathing on his own. The oxygen wasn't enough. We had to intubate him. We had to put him on the cardiac monitor. My partner was breathing for him. We were talking to one another constantly about what we were doing, what else we could do, how we were doing. I was running back and forth to the ambulance to get more equipment and more supplies, and to call the hospital and let them know that we've got a seriously injured young man that's still trapped in this car. St. Francis Hospital was still in existence at the time, and we called them and said, hey, you've got to be on alert, because when we get there, we're going to need all the help we can get. This guy's going to need blood, he's going to need a surgeon, and he's going to need it right now. He needs it right now in the middle of the street, but obviously that's not possible. But the second we can cut him out, that's what's coming, so please, please, please be ready for us. So we worked like mad people. The fire department worked to get that car pried apart from this guy. We put together the plan with my partner as to, laying out the backboard on the stretcher with the mask pants, which tells you how long ago this was. For those of you that are familiar with emergency medicine and all, we don't even use those things anymore, but they're the inflatable pants that you put on people. So the plan is that we're going to yank him out of the car the second we can, put him on that backboard, flap the mask pants on, and I'm going to be pumping the thing manually. We usually use our foot, but because we can't stop, we got to be moving this guy into the ambulance and hit the road, because this guy needs a surgeon, not skilled paramedics, and he needs it right now. So we're having all these conversations, and all this is going on, and it's actually going well, but the frustration is still huge because his blood pressure is dropping, his pulse is elevating, and we still don't have him cut out of the car. It took about 45 minutes to cut him out of the car. And the second we did, the plan was executed perfectly. And we grabbed him out, got him on the stretcher, put the mask pants on. We're pumping the mask pants. My partner's bagging him. The firefighters are helping us drag him to the ambulance, put him in the ambulance. I grab the IV bags from the bystander, thank him for his service, get into the ambulance, my partner into the back, me into the front, and I drive as fast as I can to St. Francis Hospital. And I've got a police escort, which rarely happens as well, but we've had time to sort of orchestrate this. They shut down the intersections. I mean, I'm going through red lights myself now at 60 miles an hour to get this guy to the surgeon he so desperately needs. As we load him into the back of the ambulance, he goes into full arrest. He'd already been in respiratory arrest. We were already having to breathe for him, but his heart stopped beating. And so we had to do CPR, which we did. Notified the hospital, which I did from the front of the ambulance because my partner was too busy in the back to be able to do that. And Delta and Hancock, it was probably 7 or 8 minutes to the hospital, if that. And we got him to the hospital, and we took him out of the back of the ambulance, wheeled him into the big trauma room at St. Francis Hospital, and we were met with the team we needed to be met by, including the surgeon, and they immediately went to internal cardiac massage. So, they cut open his chest and got their hands in there and clamped off blood vessels and tried to stop bleeding, and there was blood already hanging that could get plugged right into the IVs that we'd already started. I mean, it was a well-orchestrated deal from the very beginning to the very end, minus the frustration of the real life that was getting in the way. And about 45 minutes into it at the hospital, the man was pronounced dead. We had spent about 90 minutes with him, 45 or so on the scene, trying to keep him alive long enough to get him to the hospital, to get him cut out of the car and get him to the hospital. But we don't win every battle. We know that. We fight like the Dickens, but we don't always win. And we'd done the very best we could, and it had gone well. It just didn't go well in the very end. So once that was done, and he was pronounced dead, then it's time to get the ambulance put back together and get ready for the next call. And that was a chore in this case because we literally used every piece of equipment in the ambulance. I mean, this was the big one, as we like to refer to them, where we needed the cardiac monitor, we needed the mask pants, we needed the backboards, we needed everything. We used lots of IV fluids, lots of bandages, et cetera. So we resupply those from the hospital. So I'm back and forth between the ambulance and the emergency room, cleaning up the back of the ambulance, restocking the ambulance. And one of the nurses grabs me at one point and says, "Will you help me clean up this room that he's in, because the family is here and they would like to spend some time with him?" And I said, "Of course." But I also knew in the back of my mind, I mean, I loved being a paramedic. I loved every minute of it. It is so much fun, and the direct hands-on helping people is really phenomenal. But dealing with the families that have just lost a loved one, yeah, that's not the part of it that I love. So I'm happy to help, but I want to help in such a way that I can be done and out of this room before the family gets in here, because I don't really want to have to deal with that. So the nurse and I worked making the room as tidy as we could, and as you can imagine, it was a cascade of activity as well, but we were trying to make it so that it was presentable and they could have some peaceful time with their family member. And the nurse knew, because I'd said to her, you know, "I'm happy to help, but, you know, let me get out of here before the family gets here." And she, yeah, no, I get it. So she got it, but one of the other nurses didn't get it. And so just as we're finishing, the family comes in. And the family is a sister that's probably about 19 or so, and the dad. And, you know, and I am just pasted up against the wall like, oh, God, I got to sneak around here, get to the door, and get out of here. And so I am keeping as low a profile as I can, sinking into the floor and trying to camouflage myself along the wall. And the sister goes right to him and, of course, lets out a horrible scream because she can now see that it's true, and she desperately wants to believe it's not true. And the father comes straight for me. You know, as camouflaged as I am, he comes straight for me. And I'm just, you know, doing everything I can to avoid. And he reaches down, he has to reach down, and he grabs my hand, and he shakes my hand, and he says, "Thank you. Thank you for doing everything you could to save my son." And I looked at him, and it's the man that's holding the IV bags. How in the world do you stand 4 feet from where everybody's working on your son trying to keep him alive and not say, "Work harder, work faster, work smarter, work better. Isn't there anything more you can do?" He didn't say boo, and I'm sure he knew if he'd have said boo, there's police officers there that would have gotten him away. There's no way I would have let him witness that, no way. But he did, and he was completely thankful for what we had done. And I don't mind telling you that I went into the back of that ambulance and just wailed. It's like, wow, how does something like that happen? So why do I tell you this story? I tell it to you to suggest a context upon which to envision this upcoming session. On the street that day, the police officers, the firefighters, the paramedics, and a parent came together with different experience, different ideas, different ideologies, different backgrounds. They put all that aside and they focused completely on saving that man's life. We didn't accomplish our goal on that day in 1979, but we accomplished something I never could have envisioned when I got out of bed that morning. And that was we comforted a father in his most desperate moment. And we did it by being absolutely committed to what we were doing and the way we were doing it and the way we went about doing what we needed to do. Alone, I couldn't accomplish that. It took everyone on the scene. Likewise, in the Senate, alone, there's very little any one of us can do. But together, there's almost nothing we can't do. Some of us this session will focus on the economy, whether that means trying to increase jobs or trying to enhance economic security. Some of us will work on infrastructure kinds of things broadly defined, bricks and mortar, as well as the intangible things like education that really binds all this together. Some of us will focus on prevention things like healthcare and child protection and crime prevention. Others will take on issues involving civil rights, like voter protections and even civil unions. And there'll be other things that come up outside those areas that we want to focus on that will require our attention, including the people's mandate concerning recreational marijuana. But the vision that I am asking you to embrace with me is threefold. Of course, we have to focus on the goals that are important to us, like saving that man's life. But at the same time, let's be open to accomplishing goals we can't even yet envision that could be even bigger and better. But perhaps most importantly, let's commit ourselves to working at our tasks in such a way that on May 9th, if some engaged citizen peers into our legislative car where we're doing our work, they're willing to pause long enough, even in their own grief, to say thank you, even if the goal that we're trying to achieve is nearest and dearest to them and we're not able to achieve it. I submit to you that if we can meet that standard this session, it will be the greatest session in the history of the Colorado State Senate. I have worked with almost all of you, and the ones that are new I am getting to know, but I can tell you, I have no doubt we can meet that standard, even on the days when we disagree. Working to save that man's life that day was the most profound experience of my life, because it turned out the Father was right there watching my every move. And I was worthy, the entire system was worthy, not because he was watching, but because I was committed, as was everybody else on that scene and in that hospital, to trying to save his son. And we focused on every patient we ever had in the same way, even when no one was watching. Working in this great body with each one of you, I hope to harness that experience into the same kind of unspoken commitment that every police officer, every firefighter, and every paramedic had that day on that scene. If we do that, we can accomplish so much more than we intend to accomplish, and so much more than I could possibly outline in an opening day speech. But I am committing to you that I will work with you with the same drive, the same intensity, the same commitment that everybody on the street had that day back in 1979. I won't pretend that the losses won't impact me. But I commit to you, together we can power through them so that we can work to save the next life. And I invite you to join with me in that commitment. Thank you very much.